I mocked his skinny arms when he flexed, watching him walk away as others laughed ended everything. Hello, Reddit. I don't even know where to start with this. Honestly, I feel like I just need to get it all out there because I keep regretting badly I've messed up. It's eating me alive and I can't stop thinking about it. I guess I just need to write it all down so that maybe somehow it'll make sense. Maybe I'll read this back and be like, okay, that's where I lost it, or that's the moment it all fell apart. But right now, I'm just lost, and I think I'm rambling. But I don't know, maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. Either way, I needed to say it. Even if no one ever reads this, at least it's out there. So here's the context. My boyfriend Jake and I were together for a little over 2 years. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like the kind of relationship everyone hopes for. He was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. But of course, I messed that up. I don't even know how I got to this point, but here we are. We had an amazing relationship. I remember thinking at the time that we were good, maybe even better than good. We talk about the future together, and it felt right. Everything was so solid. Now here's the thing. Something I couldn't quite get past, something that I eventually started viewing as an imperfection, was the fact that Jake wasn't as big or muscular as other guys. I don't know why it started bothering me, but it did. He wasn't the type to hit the gym every day, you know. He didn't have those massive muscles or the physique that would make heads turn when he walked into a room. And when we first got together, it honestly didn't bother me at all. In fact, I kind of liked that he wasn't all about the gym, that he didn't care about trying to look like a fitness model or whatever. I thought it was refreshing, but somewhere along the way, I guess it started bugging me. Maybe it was the constant comparison to other guys I'd see, friends, random strangers, guys on social media. It wasn't like I consciously decided that Jake wasn't good enough. It's just that, over time, I found myself noticing the difference. And it started eating at me. I guess it sounds shallow when I say it out loud, but at the time it felt like a big deal to me. I knew it was a sensitive issue for Jake. He was never the type to show it, but I could tell it bothered him. He would joke around about it sometimes, trying to downplay it. But deep down, I could see that it was an insecurity for him, and I hated that. I hated that I was even thinking about it, but I couldn't seem to shake it. At first, I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to bring it up because I knew how much it affected him, and I didn't want to make him feel worse about it. So I just kept it inside, thinking maybe it would go away or that I could just ignore it. But as time went on, it started to get worse. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Every time we'd go out together or be around people, I'd feel this weight on my shoulders. Like there it was again. That moment where I'd have to deal with the fact that he didn't look like other guys. I felt like I had to explain it away. If someone pointed out how different we looked, I'd try to brush it off. Yeah, Jake wasn't as tall or muscular, but he was conventionally at least. So it wasn't a big deal, right? At least that's what I kept telling myself. But deep down, I could feel it starting to eat at me. It wasn't just some random thought that passed anymore. It felt real, and it felt like a big deal. And that pissed me off because I hated myself for even thinking like that. But it didn't help that Jake had a smaller build. He also looked a lot younger than he actually was. He was in his mid-20s, but he could easily pass for someone who was younger, maybe even in high school, and honestly, that drove me crazy. I knew it was something beyond his control, but it felt like it was always something I had to explain. It didn't help when people would comment on it. I remember one time we were out at a party and someone asked me if I was his older sister, his sister. I just laughed awkwardly and said something about how I was actually his girlfriend, but inside I was cringing. I hated it. It didn't stop there, though. I'll never forget the time someone actually mistook me for his mom. I mean, are you serious? His mom? I was 25 for crying out loud, and he was only a couple of years younger than me. How could anyone see me as his mom? It was like a punch to the gut every time it happened, but I never let it show. I would just smile and correct them, hoping the conversation would just end there. But inside, I felt like I was going crazy. Like I said before, I started comparing Jake to other guys. It wasn't fair, I knew that deep down, but I couldn't stop myself. It wasn't his fault, but I couldn't help noticing how different he was from the type of guy I had always found myself attracted to. I mean, you know the type. Tall, broad-shouldered, confident, with that whole alpha male vibe. And yeah, Jake didn't really fit that mold. He was quiet, kind, a bit more on the reserved side. The more I compared, the more insecure I got about being with him. I didn't want to be with someone weak. And that's the crazy reality of how I was feeling. I couldn't believe it, but it was the truth. It wasn't even about Jake. He was still the same sweet, caring person I had fallen for in the first place. But somehow, it started feeling like he wasn't enough. I felt like I needed someone who was strong, someone who could show the world that he was a man of power, someone who could make me feel like I was with someone who could conquer anything. And Jake? He just didn't give off that vibe. Sure, he was amazing in his own way, thoughtful, loving, loyal, but I couldn't shake this feeling that maybe I was settling. Maybe I was with the wrong person. The worst part was that I knew this wasn't Jake's fault, and I started focusing on the things I wished he had. I started wishing he had more muscles, more height, more confidence. I started wishing he was that alpha guy, the one who would fit in better with the crowd I was hanging out with, the one I thought would make me look good. And the more I thought like that, the more I started to distance myself from him. I didn't even realize it at first, but I was pulling away emotionally. I started becoming more critical, nitpicking things I never used to care about. I started questioning if I deserved someone better, someone who matched the ideal I had in my head. It wasn't even about Jake anymore. It was about the image I had created in my mind. And honestly, I hated myself for it. I hated that I was feeling this way, that I was being shallow. But at the same time, I couldn't stop myself from thinking these thoughts. The doubts just kept creeping in. I started to make snide remarks. It began slowly, just little comments here and there. At first, I didn't think much of it. It was just me being frustrated, right? Just throwing out a joke or a comment that I didn't think would mean anything. But it wasn't just jokes. It was digs. Passive-aggressive remarks about his physique, about how he looked, even though I knew how much those things bothered him. And that's the part I hate myself for the most. I knew it was an insecurity for him, but I still went there. Eventually, things got so bad that my boyfriend actually started going to the gym. Yeah, that's right. My snide remarks was what finally pushed him to start hitting the weights. I could tell that all the not-so-subtle digs were starting to eat at him, and honestly, I wasn't mad about it at the time. If anything, I thought, good, maybe this will light a fire under him. Slowly but surely, the gym started paying off for Jake. He was building muscle, his confidence was growing, and he just seemed different. It wasn't that he was turning into a completely new person overnight, but the changes were noticeable. And while part of me was impressed, another part of me, let's call it the toxic, petty side, was still cruel. I still continued with the snide remarks, like the things I would say about his arms when he flexed. He would try to show off, thinking he looked good, and I would make some offhand remark about how they were barely there. Or I'd comment about how he didn't have the strength of other guys, even though he was never trying to be something he wasn't. It wasn't like he was trying to pretend he was something he wasn't. I just couldn't stop myself. He'd say something about his workout routine, and I'd make a joke about how it didn't seem to be working, and each time I could see it hurt him. His face would drop for a second, and then he'd try to laugh it off, but I could tell he was hurt. And that was the worst part. I knew he was sensitive about it, but I kept pushing. It didn't end there, even though he was now hitting the gym. Once I started with those comments, it became a habit. It was like a way to vent my frustrations, a way to project my own insecurities onto him. The more I said, the easier it became to ignore how much it was affecting him. It started to feel almost normal to comment on his appearance. Even in public, I would make those remarks, and I could see the awkwardness in his eyes when others noticed. They probably didn't think much of it. They probably thought I was just being playful, but I could see how much it hurt him. He would pull back, laugh nervously, but you could tell he was uncomfortable. I knew I was crossing a line, but it was like I couldn't stop myself. I'd see other guys who fit my ideal, and I'd make comparisons, even if I didn't say it out loud. But deep down, I was always making those comparisons in my head. And because I couldn't measure up Jake to that ideal, I took it out on him. Those snide comments weren't just about his body anymore. They were about my frustration with the situation we were in. They were about my dissatisfaction with him, even though deep down, I knew he was everything I wanted in a partner, minus the superficial traits I had in my head. I think, in a way, I started to use those remarks as a way to cope with my own guilt. I knew I wasn't happy with myself, and I thought making fun of him would somehow make me feel better. It didn't, of course, but in the moment, it felt like a release. I wanted him to change, but I wasn't honest enough with myself to admit that I was the one who needed to change. So instead of dealing with my own issues, I projected them onto him. I started to resent him for things that were beyond his control, and the snide remarks kept coming. They were my way of pushing him away, but in the end, I was only pushing myself further into a hole I couldn't dig myself out of. Of course, once you start, there's no going back. The snide remarks, the little digs here and there, they didn't stop. In fact, they only grew even more cruel. At first, I think I was just testing the waters, trying to see if I could get away with making these comments. But once I saw that he wasn't fighting back, once I saw how much I could get away with, it got worse. I pushed it further and further. The jokes got meaner, more cutting. It wasn't just about his physique anymore. I'd throw in little jabs about his confidence, about how insecure he was when it came to his body, about how I was getting bored with him. I knew these things would hurt him, but for some messed up reason, I just kept doing it. And when he finally tried to talk to me about it, when he started to open up and tell me how much it was bothering him, I just shut him down. I would dismiss him so quickly, like his feelings didn't matter. I'd tell him that he was overreacting, that he was too sensitive, that he just couldn't take a joke. I didn't even care to listen to him. I'd roll my eyes, maybe even laugh it off, telling him that he needed to learn how to take a joke. I made him feel small, like his feelings didn't even count. I could see it in his eyes. Every time I said those things, it broke something in him. But I couldn't stop. It was like I was so deep in my own mess of insecurities that I didn't even care about the damage I was causing. And of course, after I'd shut him down, he'd pull away. He wouldn't argue back. He'd just go quiet. He'd go into himself, maybe try to act like everything was fine, but I could tell he wasn't okay. I could see it in the way he looked at me, the way he didn't fight for the relationship anymore. At some point, I even stopped feeling guilty. It became normal. The jokes, the dismissive comments, the cruelty, they just felt like part of the routine. I didn't stop to think about how bad I was making him feel because, honestly, I didn't care. I wanted him to be something he wasn't, and instead of working through that, I tried to tear him down. So how did I fuck up? Well, we were at a party. Honestly, I don't even remember what the hell we were talking about. I mean, it doesn't even matter now, right? It was just some random conversation that, in hindsight, feels so insignificant compared to what happened next. Jay decided to do this goofy flex, like trying to show off his muscles, you know? He'd been working out for a while, putting in the effort, and I could see that he was making progress. I should have been proud of him. I should have been encouraging, but instead I was an idiot. Of course, stupid me, instead of supporting him or even just keeping my mouth shut like a decent person, I laughed. I mocked him. I mean, how messed up is that? Our friends, they were actually giving him compliments, you know? But me? I made a joke about how skinny his arms were, how he looked ridiculous, and just tore into him in front of everyone. I didn't even think twice. I didn't even care how bad it might have made him feel. And the moment I said it, I saw it in his face. His expression just crumpled. His whole demeanor changed in a second. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't even trying to pretend it didn't bother him. He was genuinely upset, but instead of stopping, instead of apologizing, I kept going. I leaned into the joke, even worse. I let my friends keep laughing at him. I could have been the one to stand up for him, but no, I just let it slide. I went along with the whole thing like it was no big deal. Everyone else was laughing, and I guess I wanted to fit in. It was like the laughter was some sort of confirmation that I wasn't the odd one out. Like I was just blending in, going along with the crowd. The more they laughed, the worse I felt, but also the more I kept going with it. But Jake, he didn't laugh. He didn't try to make a joke out of it like I thought he might. He didn't even try to save face. He just went silent. That's when I knew it had hit him hard. He didn't say anything. He didn't yell or make a scene. He didn't even look at me. He just turned around and walked away. I watched him leave, and honestly, in that moment, I didn't think much of it. I figured he was just going to grab some air, cool off for a second, or maybe he was just tired of the whole situation. At the time, I didn't even register the gravity of what I had done. It was just a stupid comment in the moment, a laugh that felt like nothing at the time, but now I realize that it destroyed everything. That day changed everything. I didn't realize it then, but now, looking back, I can see that was the moment everything started to change. I guess it didn't hit me at first because I was just too wrapped up in myself. When I came out and looked for him, I saw Jake wasn't in the house anymore. He hadn't left like I thought he would, but he wasn't exactly standing there waiting for me either. He was in the car. I don't know what I expected, maybe for him to be standing outside, pacing, waiting to have some big confrontation, asking me why I treated him like that in front of everyone, or maybe even screaming at me. Something, anything, to make it feel like there was still a chance to fix things. But no. He just sat in the car, staring straight ahead, not saying a word. I got in beside him, and I thought for sure he was going to say something. I mean, after the way I acted, after what happened, he had to say something, right? At least I thought he would. But no, the silence stretched on. I kept waiting for him to speak up, to finally let me have it, to call me out for being such a jerk. But nothing. Honestly, I thought it was kind of weird at first. I was expecting him to complain, or, I don't know, tell me how I'd hurt him. He always used to talk things through, even when things got awkward, even when things weren't so perfect. But he didn't. He didn't say a damn word. In my head, I was already preparing my response. I was thinking, okay, when he finally says something, I'll just tell him he's overreacting. I'll just remind him that it was a joke, that he's way too serious about this. I could already picture myself doubling down, playing it off like I didn't really do anything wrong, but he didn't give me the chance. He just sat there, quiet. The more the silence stretched on, the worse it felt, and when we finally drove off, he still didn't say anything. It wasn't a fight, it wasn't an argument, it wasn't anything I could just brush off. It was just him, completely withdrawing. I thought that, by the way he was sitting there, looking out the window, that he was going to play along with the usual, it's fine routine. I was expecting him to let it go, like he always did when I made light of things. We drove home in silence, not even a glance between us. That night, I kept thinking he would say something, that he'd come around, that we'd talk it out, that I'd somehow find a way to make it better. But he didn't. After that, I started to notice Jake pulling away, and I mean really pulling away. At first, I was genuinely surprised by it. I kept thinking to myself, okay, he's just processing things, right? I thought maybe I had hurt him, sure, but he'd come around, right? I expected him to bridge the gap like he always did before, like he always made the effort to do. I figured we'd talk it out eventually, and everything would be fine. But nope. Instead, I felt like the distance just kept growing. And that honestly freaked me out. It wasn't just that he was quiet, it was that he was different. He wasn't reaching out to me the way he used to. He wasn't planning dates. It was like he'd shut off, and it felt weird. I've always been the one who didn't put in as much effort, always letting him take the lead, take charge of the relationship. But now, he wasn't doing that anymore, and I didn't know how to respond. For the first time, I was the one waiting for him to come back to me, but he didn't. Then I noticed something even stranger. Jake had been going to the gym for a while now, but after everything, it was like he was living at the gym. I'm talking seriously. The guy became a gym rat. He was always working out. It wasn't just the usual, a few workouts here and there kind of thing. It was obsessive. He started pouring more energy into the gym than into anything else. He was pushing himself harder, doing every little thing right. He was eating the right foods, getting vitamins, pushing himself to exhaustion. At first, I didn't know whether to be impressed or concerned. I mean, I could see it. His body was getting more defined, muscles were popping where there weren't any before, but there was something off about it. It wasn't like he was doing it for himself. I started to think that maybe he was trying to do it to show me something, to prove something, to make up for what I had said. It felt like he was creating this new version of himself that I didn't know. It was like he was moving on, reinventing himself, and I had no idea where I fit into this new picture. More months passed, and Jake just kept getting deeper into his fitness routine. At first, it was all about the gym, but over time, he really started to get jacked. His transformation was insane, and I won't lie, part of me loved seeing it. It was like the guy I had always wished he could be was finally showing up. But at the same time, I started to get worried. It was like he was obsessed. It wasn't just about getting fit anymore. It was like this whole new lifestyle had overtaken him. And it wasn't just his body changing. He was getting more into his job too, focusing on his career like I'd never seen him do before. And things just kept getting better for him. He got a promotion. He moved into a new house. I could see the changes, and I was honestly happy for him. Ecstatic, really. It was like everything was falling into place for us. He even got a new car. For the first time in a while, it felt like everything was going perfectly for him. Then came the day we were supposed to move into the new house. We'd been packing up all our things, getting everything into boxes, and just doing the usual chaos of moving. You know how it is, throwing things in boxes, deciding what to keep, what to toss, all that stuff. But we were almost done, and I realized we needed a couple more boxes. We were both hungry too, so Jake suggested that he finish up with the little things left to do while I ran out to grab the boxes and pick up some fast food. Nothing major, right? I figured I'd be back in under an hour, tops. I wasn't gone that long, but when I got back, I could immediately tell something was off. It was eerily quiet. I walked into the apartment and it felt like everything was missing. I mean, there were just a few things left, some boxes, but the place looked like it had been half-packed, like it was halfway through a move. I was immediately freaked out. Did the movers come while I was gone? Why wasn't Jake here to help wrap things up? I pulled out my phone to check for any messages from him. Nothing. So I called him. No answer. I texted. Nothing. I tried calling again, over and over, and after what felt like an eternity, he finally picked up. By then, I was kind of frantic. I started asking him if the movers had come, and he told me yeah, they had. He had sent his stuff to his new house. I was shocked, of course, asking him what he meant. That's when he told me the words I never expected to hear. He said he was done with the relationship. Done. He said he wasn't going to stay with someone who never believed in him and loved mocking him. And that was it. He wasn't going to be with me anymore. And just like that, he hung up. No explanation, no nothing. Just bam. Done. I tried calling him back, but he blocked me immediately. I was left standing there, phone still in my hand, my heart in my throat. I was in complete shock. I mean, how did we go from talking about our future together, excited about a new house, to this? Just like that, it was all over. No warning, nothing. And the worst part, I had no idea what had triggered it. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I was stunned, devastated. All that time, I thought things were fine. Hell, I thought we were moving forward together. But in reality, Jake had already checked out. I was absolutely wrecked. I don't even know how I managed to call my brother to come pick me up because I was sobbing so hard. My whole body was shaking. It felt like my world had just shattered into pieces and I couldn't make sense of anything. I honestly don't even remember the car ride to his place. It was a blur, just me curled up in the passenger seat, still crying, barely able to breathe between sobs. I know I was just in shock, but it felt like the pain was so deep I didn't know how I was going to make it through. When we got to his place, my brother thankfully helped me pack up what little I had left at the apartment. I honestly don't even remember grabbing my stuff. The days that followed were a blur of tears. I couldn't even bring myself to eat. I would just lie there, thinking about everything, replaying the scene over and over in my head. How could I have messed up so badly? Why had I pushed him to the point where he had to walk away from everything we'd built? And what hurt the most? He didn't even give me a chance to fix it. He was already gone, emotionally checked out, long before he actually left. I couldn't stop trying to contact him. I kept texting, calling, sending messages, anything. I guess I was hoping that if I just tried hard enough, he would see how sorry I was and come back. But of course, that didn't happen. Eventually, he sent me a message. I remember reading it, and it felt like someone had just punched me in the gut. He told me to stop contacting him, that the relationship had ended the night I mocked him in front of everyone, and that he had been done with me for a long time. The worst part? He told me that if I didn't stop trying to reach him, he'd get a restraining order against me. That was a couple of months ago now, but it still feels like it happened yesterday. I can't even describe how badly it still hurts. It's like there's this heavy weight on my chest that I can't shake off, no matter what I do. I've tried to move on, tried to distract myself, but I feel like I'm stuck in this hole, and I can't climb out. I don't even know who I am anymore. The version of me that felt strong and confident is gone. I just feel empty. I don't think I'll ever be able to fully get over it. It got so bad that I ended up quitting my job. I couldn't focus. I couldn't find the motivation to do anything. I would drag myself in every day, just going through the motions, and I felt like a zombie. My mind was still stuck on Jake, still stuck on all the mistakes I made, and I couldn't even pretend to care about anything else. So I quit. I just couldn't do it anymore. At first, my brother was understanding. He let me stay at his place without asking for anything in return. But lately, I can tell he's getting frustrated with me. I can't blame him. It's been months, and I'm still a mess. He's been pushing me to get back on my feet, start looking for a job, and contribute. He's even said that if I want to keep staying with him, I need to start paying rent. I get it. I do. But it's so hard to even think about getting back to normal. How do I move on when everything reminds me of the guy I lost? How do I get my life together when I'm still falling apart inside? I don't even know why I'm writing this, honestly. Maybe it's just because I need to unload. I need to put it somewhere, even if no one reads it. I'll never forgive myself for what I did to him. I'll never forgive myself for mocking him when all he was doing was trying to improve, trying to become the person I always wanted him to be. He worked so hard, and instead of supporting him, I tore him down. And now he's gone, and it's too late to fix anything. I feel like I've ruined everything, and I don't know how to ever move on.